Welcome to Cardio-respiratory Fitness, where we are going to be talking about not only the cardiovascular system, but also the respiratory system and how that plays an important role in your total overall health. So, what is cardiorespiratory fitness? It's basically looking at the fitness of the heart, the lungs, the blood, and the blood vessels. It's the ability of our whole body to do physical activity for prolonged periods of time. So, being able to go out there and do a workout for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And we typically say that a person who's in really good shape has an above average cardiorespiratory fitness. So they basically can take their oxygen consumption and utilize that during exercise to provide the muscles with everything that they need throughout exercise. So, what is the function of our cardiorespiratory system? To deliver oxygen and other nutrients to the part of our body, to remove carbon dioxide and other metabolic wastes, such as lactic acid and creatine kinase. It's also used for thermal regulation. So you notice that when you start exercising, your body starts getting warmer because we draw that heat derived from the oxygen coming into our muscles or cellular respiration to generate heat to warm us and make us sweat. It allows us to maintain our acid-base balance and overall body fluid balance. And it also contributes to our immune function. So studies show that individuals who work out on a fairly regular basis put their immune system or put their cells under what is called cellular stress. Those cells tend to then be a little more efficient in what they're doing. And so immune functions tend to increase. Some immediate effects of cardiorespiratory fitness is you start getting blood flow all over your whole entire body. Your heart starts to increase, which means it's going to pump more blood. Your lungs start to exchange gases very quickly. What ends up happening is since your body is spending all this time sending blood around the body and nutrients and oxygen and carbon dioxide, it does not do anything in terms of digestion. So blood flow is reduced to your stomach, intestines, liver, and kidneys because it wants to focus on the body movement, not on the body's metabolic functions. Increased blood flow to the skin we talked about, you start sweating, and then you also are able to transport that oxygen a little more efficiently. Long-term effects, we've gone over these numerous times. You're going to obviously have improved mental capacity. Your heart size is going to be stronger because that muscle is going to get stronger. Your ability to take in oxygen and exchange carbon dioxide increases, decreased risk of certain cancers, higher bone density, so you're at lower risk for osteoporosis. So all sorts of different things that cardiorespiratory fitness contributes to. So we're going to start out by looking at the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system is also called the circulatory system. Its main role is to circulate gases, our oxygen and carbon dioxide, nutrients, and also waste materials. So 3 organs involved in the cardiovascular system is going to be the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. So the heart, there are 4 chambers to the heart. We have the right atrium and right ventricle, and the left atrium and left ventricle. So in this diagram, here's the picture of your heart. It's about the size of your fist. It's located underneath your sternum or your breastbone. In our muscle unit, we learned that the heart is made up mainly of cardiac muscle. It involuntary contracts, so you don't tell it what to do, and it pumps blood through the lungs and the rest of the body. So going to go through this real briefly. Blue blood means deoxygenated blood. Red blood means oxygenated blood. So blood from our brain, blood from our bodies enters into the right atrium. It is pumped to the right ventricle. It then passes into the left lung where it picks up oxygen and becomes oxygenated again. It's going to dump off its carbon dioxide. That oxygenated blood then comes in through the left atrium, left ventricle, gets pumped out through the aorta, either to the brain or the rest of the body, where it drops off that oxygen, picks up carbon dioxide, and then makes its way back to the heart once again. Within that cardiovascular system, we do have a network of blood vessels. And so blood has to pass through these vessels, and our blood cells are the ones that are going to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. They'll also carry nutrients. So you can see our arteries usually go and take blood away from the body. And so they're going to come from the heart to the rest of the body. They carry our oxygenated blood. They then come down to smaller networks, our capillaries. So those are going to join my arteries and veins. This is where gas exchange is going to occur. And then the deoxygenated blood goes toward the heart through the veins. So quick little video here.
There are three main kinds of blood vessels: arteries, capillaries, and veins. Arteries are large blood vessels that carry blood from your heart to the rest of your body. This blood is rich in oxygen and nutrients. As arteries get farther away from the heart, they begin to branch and become smaller and smaller. The smallest branches are called capillaries. And this is where the oxygen in your blood is transferred to your tissues. In exchange, the wastes from your cells, including carbon dioxide, are transferred into the blood. Just beyond this area, the capillaries begin to merge together and eventually form larger vessels called veins, which lead back to the heart. As the vessels carry deoxygenated blood back to the heart, waste products are routed to other organs, where they are removed for disposal. As the deoxygenated blood makes its way back through the heart and lungs, it picks up oxygen and nutrients. The heart then pumps the blood out through the arteries, and the cycle is repeated.
So a little bit about how they work on a cellular level. So let's move now into the respiratory system. The respiratory system is basically the site of where gas exchange occurs. So between the environment, so taking oxygen into the body, and then also carbon dioxide being removed from the body. And it also plays a role of acid-base balance during exercise. So how does breathing work within the respiratory system? You've got a lot of muscles that are involved in the breathing process. And so it's usually the contraction and the relaxation of those muscles. One of them is called the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is right underneath your rib cage. And then you also have muscles lining the outside of or in between all of your ribs. And those are called intercostal muscles. So they allow air to be drawn in from the atmosphere towards into the throat. Air moves down the trachea into what are called the bronchi. The bronchi are kind of branches of a tree into tiny little air sacs called alveoli. Gas exchange is what occurs at the alveoli, allowing oxygen to then be returned to the heart to be pumped to the rest of the body, and then taking in oxygen or carbon dioxide to be removed from the lungs. Breathing typically consists of two phases, so inspiration or taking in our oxygen, and expiration, which is the removing of oxygen. When it comes to exercise, we all know that you're exchanging a lot of oxygen as you're working out because you're breathing very heavily. And so there's a term associated with exercising called EPOC, or exercise post-oxygen consumption. Basically, what ends up happening is you're breathing really, really hard. So you're exercising right here. You're taking in oxygen, but you're also in an oxygen deficit. So you're using that oxygen into your muscles in order to generate ATP, or our energy bank, in order for our muscles to move. So that oxygen has to be paid back. So as we go through our exercise, you can see we're breathing heavier, but we are also in more of a deficit. We get to a point where our exercise stops. Okay. And then afterwards, you can see we're still taking in a lot of oxygen because you have to pay back that oxygen debt. So that oxygen you utilize during exercise has to be burned back. So you continue to burn calories after you exercise because you're using that opportunity to pay back some of that oxygen that you borrowed, and also utilizing it to repair any damaged cells that might have occurred during exercise. So one last video to show you guys oxygen's journey through the body. So this combines both the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system to show how these all work during exercise and how we get that full exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide.
You breathe in about 17,000 times per day. It's a process you rarely think about, but behind the scenes, a huge coordinated effort is playing out. Your vital organs, the gut, brain, bones, lungs, blood, and heart, work together to sustain your life by delivering oxygen to tissues throughout your body. Most of our cells need oxygen because it's one of the key ingredients of aerobic respiration. That's the process that produces a molecule called ATP, which our cells use to power their many incredible functions. But getting oxygen throughout our bodies is a surprisingly difficult task. Gas enters cells by diffusing in from their surroundings, and that only happens efficiently over tiny distances. So, for oxygen to reach the cells within our bodies, it needs a transportation network. This is where our 20 trillion red blood cells come in. Each one contains about 270 million oxygen-binding molecules of hemoglobin, which is what gives blood its scarlet hue. To make these cells, the body uses raw materials that become available from the food we eat. So in some ways, you could say that oxygen's journey through the body really begins in the gut. Here, in an amazing display of mechanical and chemical digestion, food gets broken down into its smallest elements. Like iron, the building block of hemoglobin. Iron is carried through the cardiovascular system to the body's hematopoietic tissue. This tissue is the birthplace of red blood cells, and it can be found enclosed within our bone marrow cavities. The kidneys regulate our levels of red blood cells through the release of erythropoietin, a hormone which causes marrow to increase production. Our bodies churn out roughly 2.5 million red blood cells per second, a number equivalent to the entire population of Paris, so that oxygen that makes it to the lungs will have ample transportation. But before oxygen can even reach the lungs, the brain needs to get involved. The brainstem initiates breathing by sending a message through your nervous system, all the way to muscles of the diaphragm and ribs. This causes them to contract, thus increasing the space inside the ribcage, which allows the lungs to expand. That expansion drops your lungs' internal air pressure, making air rush in. It's tempting to think of our lungs as two big balloons, but they're actually a lot more complicated than that. Here's why. The red blood cells in the vessels within your lungs can only pick up oxygen molecules that are very close to them. If our lungs were shaped like balloons, air that was not in direct contact with the balloon's inner surface couldn't diffuse through. Luckily, our lungs' architecture ensures that very little oxygen is wasted. Their interior is divided into hundreds of millions of miniature balloon-like projections called alveoli that dramatically increase the contact area to somewhere around 100 square meters. The alveolar walls are made of extremely thin, flat cells that are surrounded by capillaries. Together, the alveolar wall and capillaries make a 2-cell thick membrane that brings blood and oxygen close enough for diffusion. These oxygen-enriched cells are then carried from the lungs through the cardiovascular network, a massive collection of blood vessels that reaches every cell in the body. If we laid this system out end to end in a straight line, the vessels would wrap around the Earth several times. Propelling red blood cells through this extensive network requires a pretty powerful pump, and that's where your heart comes in. The human heart pumps an average of about 100,000 times per day, and it's the powerhouse that ultimately gets oxygen where it needs to go, completing the body's team effort. Just think, this entire complex system is built around the delivery of tiny molecules of oxygen. If just one part malfunctioned, so would we. Breathe in. Your gut, brain, bones, lungs, blood, and heart are continuing their incredible act of coordination that keeps you alive. Breathe out.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit about the cardiorespiratory system and how everything is being able to be exchanged throughout the body. It's a great network, and you guys should learn to love it and treat it well.